It was just another bad Tuesday until a routine disturbance call turned into a career-ending nightmare. The defiant teenager I arrested? He was the new chief of police's son. It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays are always the worst. The weekend is a distant memory, and Friday is a lifetime away. The air was thick and humid, the kind of heat that makes your uniform stick to you in all the wrong places, and the leather of the cruiser's seat feel like a branding iron. I'd spent the morning dealing with a fender bender and a noise complaint from some old lady who swore her neighbor's wind chimes were communicating with the devil. My coffee was cold, my patience was thin, and I was just counting the hours until I could clock out and grab a beer. That's when the call came in. Dispatch to 3 Adam 14. We've got a 10:53 at Oakwood Park. Reports of a group of youths causing a disturbance. A disturbance. That could mean anything from kids playing their music too loud to a full-blown brawl. 10-4 dispatch, I grumbled into the radio. 3 Adam 14 is en route. Oakwood Park was usually a quiet spot. Swing sets, a couple of baseball diamonds, a public pool that smelled perpetually of chlorine and sunscreen. As I pulled up, I saw the scene. It wasn't a brawl, it was just teenagers. A group of about 5 or 6 of them gathered around a picnic table, a Bluetooth speaker blaring some kind of rap music I was too old to recognize. They were laughing, jostling each other. Being kids. But the complaint was a complaint, and I had a job to do. I killed the siren but left the lights flashing, just to let them know I meant business. Stepping out of the AC into the wall of heat, I felt a fresh wave of irritation. "All right, folks, let's turn the music down," I said, my voice already carrying that hard edge I used when I didn't want to argue. Most of them quieted down, looking at me with that familiar mix of fear and resentment. But one of them, a tall, lanky kid in a red hoodie, just stared at me. He couldn't have been more than 16. He had this look on his face, not aggressive, but defiant, like I was the one interrupting his day. "We're not hurting anyone," he said, his voice steady. He didn't shout, which almost annoyed me more. "I didn't say you were. I said turn the music down. We've had a complaint." I gestured towards the speaker. He shrugged, a slow, deliberate motion. "It's a public park. We're the public." Okay, a smartass. My patience, already worn down to a nub, snapped. "I'm not going to ask you again, son. Turn it off, or I'll turn it off for you." I took a step closer. I saw his friends fidgeting, one of them discreetly pulling out their phone to record. Good. Let them record me doing my job. The kid in the red hoodie didn't flinch. He just held my gaze. It was the kind of stare that said, "I'm not scared of you." In my 10 years on the force, I've learned that look usually means trouble. It means they'll push until you push back harder. "What's your name?" I asked, my hand moving to rest on my belt. "Why do you need my name?" he shot back. "Am I being detained?" He was quoting a YouTube video he'd seen. I was sure of it. This new generation, they all thought they were lawyers. "You're causing a public disturbance," I said, my voice dropping lower. "Now I've given you a lawful order. You can either comply, or we can take a ride downtown and figure it out there. Your choice." He smirked. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk, but I saw it. And in that moment, all the heat, the bad coffee, the wind chime lady, it all boiled over. He saw my uniform, and he saw a challenge, not an authority figure. "We're not doing anything wrong," he repeated, and then he made his mistake. He turned his back on me, a clear sign of disrespect, and reached into his pocket. My training kicked in. Adrenaline surged through me like a jolt of electricity. Pocket. Reach. Threat. The sequence is burned into your brain at the academy. You don't have time to think, you just react. "Hands where I can see them," I yelled, moving forward fast. He turned back around, a look of surprise on his face, his hand still in his pocket. He was pulling something out. I didn't wait to see what it was. I shoved him, hard, one hand flat against his chest, to create distance, to knock him off balance, but I was wound too tight. The shove was harder than I intended. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, and went down. He hit the grass with a grunt, his phone, not a weapon, a phone skittering across the ground. A collective gasp went through his friends. The phone cameras were all pointed directly at me now. The kid on the ground looked up, his eyes wide with shock and a flash of pain. A small trickle of blood was coming from his lip, where he must have bit it on the way down. The defiance was gone. Now, there was just fear. And for a split second, a cold pit formed in my stomach. But I couldn't show it. I couldn't back down. I'd committed. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting," I barked, pulling out my cuffs. I hauled him to his feet, cuffed his hands behind his back, and marched him toward my cruiser, the chorus of his friend's protests ringing in my ears. The ride to the station was silent. In the rearview mirror, I could see the kid's reflection. He was just a boy with a bloody lip who was probably terrified. The adrenaline started to fade, replaced by the sour taste of a report I was not looking forward to writing. Back at the precinct, I processed him. Name: Jamal. Age: 16. No priors. I sat him in a holding cell while I wrote up the incident report, carefully choosing my words. Subject was non-compliant, adopted an aggressive stance, made a furtive movement toward his pocket. I utilized a control technique to neutralize a perceived threat. It all sounded so clean, so professional, so sterile. My sergeant, Dave, a guy with 25 years on the job and a face like a roadmap of bad days, read over my report. He grunted. "Kid giving you a hard time?" "The usual," I said. "Thinks he knows the law better than we do." "He gets one phone call," Dave said, gesturing toward the holding cell. I watched as the kid, Jamal, spoke quietly into the phone. His voice was shaking now. He looked even younger under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. He finished his call and sat back down, his head in his hands. An hour passed. I was finishing up the last of the paperwork when Sergeant Dave walked back over to my desk. His face was pale. "Miller," he said, his voice unusually quiet. "You know we've got the new chief of police starting Monday, right? Transfer from up north." I looked up, annoyed at the non sequitur. "Yeah, Chief Irons or something. What about him?" Dave took a deep breath. He glanced over at the kid in the holding cell, then looked back at me. His eyes were grave. "The kid, Jamal, he didn't call his mom." I shrugged, my pen hovering over the report. "So? Who'd he call? His lawyer?" Dave just stared at me, and the look on his face made the hair on my arms stand up. "No, Miller," he said slowly, each word landing like a hammer blow. "He called his dad. He called Chief Marcus Irons." The name hit me like a physical blow. Chief Marcus Irons. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mouth went dry, and the meticulously crafted words of my report suddenly seemed like the flimsiest, most pathetic lies ever put to paper. I looked from Sergeant Dave's pitying expression to the holding cell. The kid, Jamal, the chief's son, was no longer a nameless punk who'd mouthed off to me in a park. He was a landmine I had just gleefully jumped on with both feet. "Chief? Irons?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" Dave just nodded grimly. "He's on his way. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes until my career, my pension, my entire life went up in smoke. My mind raced, frantically replaying the entire incident. The music, the defiance, the smirk, the reach into the pocket, the shove. Oh God, the shove. I saw it from a dozen different angles, a high-def, slow-motion horror movie playing in my head. The kid going down, the blood on his lip, and worst of all, the sea of cell phone cameras, all pointed at me, all capturing my monumental screw-up. "The report," I croaked, looking down at the paper on my desk as if it were a venomous snake. Furtive movement. Dave, he was a kid. He was non-compliant with a lawful order, Dave cut in, his voice low and firm. He was in self-preservation mode now, distancing himself, creating a wall between the department and my actions. "You stick to your report, Miller. It's all you've got. You perceived a threat based on your training and experience. You used the minimal amount of force necessary to gain control of the subject. That's the story. You understand?" I nodded, but my hands were shaking. The story felt like a paper shield against a hurricane named Marcus Irons. I looked back at Jamal. He wasn't looking at me. He was just staring at the cinder-block wall, his shoulders slumped. The fear was still there, but now there was something else in his posture. A quiet confidence. He knew help was coming. He knew the tables were about to turn so violently they'd be torn from the floor. The next few minutes were the longest of my life. The usual buzz of the precinct died down to a tense whisper. The word was spreading. Every officer who walked past my desk gave me a wide berth, their eyes a mixture of morbid curiosity and better you than me. I felt like an animal in a cage. Then the front doors of the station slid open. A man walked in, and the air crackled. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a crisp, dark suit that looked like it cost more than my car. He was tall, built solid like a former linebacker, with a completely bald head and a neatly trimmed goatee that was more salt than pepper. He moved with an unnerving stillness, his eyes scanning the room, taking in everything and everyone with an intelligent, assessing gaze. He didn't look angry. He looked controlled. That was so much worse. He walked straight to the front desk. "I'm here for Jamal Irons," he said, his voice a deep, calm baritone that cut through the silence. Sergeant Dave met him, his own bluster and bravado completely gone, replaced by a deferential respect. "Chief Irons, we were just processing his release." Irons didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on the holding cell. He walked over, and the officer on duty fumbled with the keys to unlock the door. Jamal stood up and walked out, not looking at his father. The chief put a hand on his son's shoulder and gently tilted his chin up, examining the cut on his lip. For a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a flash of pure, unadulterated fury. It was there, and then it was gone, replaced by that icy calm. He spoke softly to his son, too low for me to hear. Jamal nodded, and the chief pointed him toward a chair in the corner. "Wait there," he commanded gently. Then he turned. His eyes swept across the room and landed on me. He didn't have to ask. He knew. He walked toward my desk, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silent room. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of me, forcing me to crane my neck to look up at him. He picked up my report. His eyes scanned the page, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I could feel every eye in the precinct on my back. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. He read my words. Aggressive stance, furtive movement, control technique. He placed the report back on my desk, positioning it perfectly in the center. His movements precise and deliberate. Then he looked at me. His gaze was so intense it felt like he was dissecting me, peeling back every layer of bravado and procedure to see the panicked, cornered man underneath. "Officer Miller," he said, and his voice was so quiet I had to lean in to hear it. It was a low, dangerous hum. "My son's phone has a recording. It starts about 10 seconds before you put your hands on him. I suggest your version of events had better match it." Perfectly. My blood ran cold. A recording. Not just the janky, shaky cell phone videos from his friends, but his own. Clear audio. A perfect view of my face, twisted with anger and impatience. My words. My shove. Everything. The sterile, carefully chosen phrases of my report evaporated into a puff of smoke. There was no perceived threat. There was no aggressive stance. There was just me, a cop on a power trip, and a 16-year-old kid who had pushed my buttons on a bad day. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. What could I say? "Sir, I had a long morning. Your son had a smirk I didn't like." Every possible excuse died on my tongue, tasting like ash. Chief Irons leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "Let me tell you what I see on that video, Officer Miller. I see my son and his friends listening to music in a public park. I see a police officer approach. I see my son question you, which, last I checked, is not a crime in this country. And then I see you, an armed officer of the law, a grown man, violently shove my unarmed 16-year-old son to the ground for reaching for his phone." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a death sentence. He straightened up and glanced around the silent precinct. My colleagues were suddenly fascinated by their computer screens, by the scuff marks on their shoes. by anything and everything that wasn't me. I was an island, and the tide was coming in fast. "So I'm going to ask you one time, Miller," Irons continued, his voice returning to its calm, even tone. "And I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Was your report an accurate and truthful account of the events that transpired in Oakwood Park this afternoon?" This was it. The moment of truth. Lie, and he'd crucify me with the video. Tell the truth, and I'd be admitting to falsifying a police report, on top of assault. It was a checkmate. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My career wasn't just circling the drain, it was being sucked into a jet engine. I swallowed hard, the sound unnaturally loud in the dead quiet. "No, sir," I managed to choke out. "It was not." A flicker of something not satisfaction, maybe just grim confirmation, passed over his face. He nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty. It's a bit late, but it's a start." He turned to Sergeant Dave, who was hovering nearby, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. "Sergeant, please ensure Mr. Irons's personal effects are returned to him immediately. The charges are being dropped." "Yes, Chief," Dave mumbled, scurrying away to do his bidding. Irons turned his attention back to me. I braced myself. This was when he'd demand my badge and gun. Tell me to clean out my locker. Tell me I was suspended pending an internal affairs investigation that would, without a shadow of a doubt, end my career. I deserved it. I knew I did. But the chief just stood there, watching me, his expression unreadable. He let the silence stretch, wringing every last drop of agony out of the moment. Then he said something I never expected. "Firing you would be easy, Miller." I looked up, confused. "It would be the simplest thing in the world," he went on, his voice thoughtful. "I'd be the new chief who came in and cleaned house on day one. The press would love it. The community would see it as a step in the right direction. But it doesn't solve the real problem, does it? Firing you just makes you somebody else's problem. And it doesn't teach the other officers in this room anything except how not to get caught." He took a step back, folding his arms across his chest. He was no longer just a father. This was the chief of police, laying out his philosophy. "I'm not interested in easy," he said. "I'm interested in change. Real, lasting change. And that, officer, is often uncomfortable. It's messy. And it requires accountability. Not just on paper. Real, public accountability." I had no idea where he was going with this, and the uncertainty was a new kind of torture. What was worse than being fired? Jamal came back over, his phone and wallet now in his hand, and stood beside his father. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the floor, the cut on his lip looking darker under the fluorescent lights. "You embarrass my son," Chief Irons said, his voice hardening again. "You abused your authority. And you lied to cover it up. You broke the trust between this department and the community it's sworn to protect before I even had a chance to walk through the door. That trust needs to be rebuilt. And it's going to start with you." He leaned forward, placing both hands flat on my desk, his face just inches from mine. The icy control was back, his eyes like polished steel. "So here's what's going to happen. You're not suspended. You're not on desk duty. Tomorrow, you will report for your regular shift. You'll put on your uniform, you'll get in your cruiser, and you'll do your job. But at 6 p.m., you and I are going back to Oakwood Park. I'm arranging a community meeting, and you are going to get up on a stage in front of my son, his friends, and any resident who wants to come, and you are going to explain your actions." He wasn't finished. The final blow was yet to come. "And just so there's no confusion, just so you don't revert to the sanitized version in this work of fiction you call a report," he said, tapping the paper with a single, sharp finger. "We're going to be playing the unedited footage from your body camera on a 10-foot screen right behind you." My body camera. I had completely forgotten about the body camera. It was department policy. Always on. Always recording. The small black box on my chest had been a silent, impartial witness to the entire ugly affair. It would have captured everything. My tone, my aggressive posture, the unwarranted shove, the fear in Jamal's eyes, the blood on his lip. All in high-definition, wide-angle clarity for an entire community to see. Playing it on a 10-foot screen wasn't just accountability. It was a public execution of my career and my reputation. The thought made me physically ill. To stand there, exposed and humiliated, while my worst moment as a cop was projected for the world to judge, it was a punishment far more brutal than being fired. Being fired was private. This was a public shaming on a scale I couldn't comprehend. "Chief, I started, my voice cracking. I wanted to beg. I wanted to tell him I'd quit. I'd move away. I'd do anything but that. "There's no discussion, officer," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. 6 p.m., Oakwood Park. Be there. He put his hand on Jamal's shoulder. "Let's go, son." And with that they walked out, leaving a crater of silence in their wake. The rest of my shift was a blur. Dave tried to offer some half-hearted words of encouragement, something about taking it on the chin, but I couldn't even hear him. I felt like I was underwater, the weight of the next 24 hours crushing me. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring past my window. I didn't sleep. I just sat in my dark living room, replaying the incident over and over, imagining the faces in the crowd, the jeers, the angry shouts. The next day was even worse. Every minute felt like an hour. When I reported for duty, the atmosphere in the precinct was thick with tension. No one looked me in the eye. I was a pariah, a ghost haunting the halls of my own career. At 5:30 p.m., I drove to Oakwood Park. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. As I pulled up, my stomach twisted into a knot. A portable stage had been set up near the picnic tables where it had all started. A large inflatable screen, the kind they use for movies in the park, loomed behind it like a giant white tombstone. There were already 100 people there, maybe more. Neighbors, community activists, reporters with cameras. And standing near the stage, looking just as grim as I felt, were Jamal and his friends. Chief Irons met me by my cruiser. He was in his full dress uniform now, sharp and imposing. He looked me up and down, his expression unreadable. "Ready, Officer Miller?" I shook my head. "No, sir, but I'm here." He just nodded. "That's all that's required." He walked me to the stage. As I stepped up, a wave of murmurs and angry muttering rippled through the crowd. I could feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them, burning with contempt. I stood at the podium, my legs feeling like jelly. Chief Irons took the microphone first. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his powerful voice commanding immediate silence. "I'm Chief Marcus Irons. I haven't been your chief for even a week, and already we have a problem of trust." He explained what happened in this very park, in simple, direct terms. He didn't embellish. He didn't have to. He concluded, "Actions have consequences, and transparency is the first step toward rebuilding trust. Officer Miller is here to take accountability for his actions. First, you will see exactly what I saw, what the Internal Review Board will see. You will see the unedited body camera footage." He nodded to a technician. The screen flickered to life. And there I was, 10 feet tall. My face was a mask of anger. My voice was sharp, condescending. The crowd was silent, captivated. I couldn't watch. I stared down at my shoes, my face burning with shame as the audio of my own arrogance filled the park. Then came the moment, the reach, my shout, the shove, the image of Jamal, a kid, hitting the ground. A collective gasp went through the crowd, followed by an explosion of angry shouts. "Thug!" someone yelled. "Fire him!" screamed another. It was everything I had feared, and worse. When the video ended, the screen went black, and the noise of the crowd swelled. Chief Irons held up a hand, and slowly the shouting subsided. He turned and looked at me. It was my turn. I stepped up to the microphone, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the sides of the podium to steady them. I looked out at the sea of hostile faces. I saw Jamal, standing with his father, his expression no longer defiant or scared, but just watchful. I cleared my throat. My prepared speech, the carefully worded apology that PR would have written, vanished from my mind. All I had left was the raw, humiliating truth. "There is no excuse for what you just saw," I began, my voice trembling. "It wasn't protocol. It wasn't procedure. It was a failure. My failure. I was having a bad day, and I let my frustration and my authority get the better of me. I saw a kid, not as a citizen, but as a challenge. I escalated a situation that required nothing but patience and respect. I didn't see a threat. I created one. I looked directly at Jamal. "I am sorry," I said, and the words felt inadequate, but they were all I had. "I was wrong. I terrified you and I hurt you, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry. I broke your trust, and I broke the trust of this entire community." I paused, taking a breath. "I don't know if I can earn that trust back, and I don't know if I deserve to. But I promise you this. That man you saw on the screen, I will spend every remaining day I have in this uniform making sure I am never that man again. Thank you." I stepped back, my heart pounding. The crowd was silent. No one was yelling anymore. No one was jeering. They were just looking at me, their expressions a mix of anger, skepticism, and for a few, maybe a flicker of something else. Chief Irons stepped forward. "What you've just witnessed," he said to the crowd, "is the beginning of accountability. It doesn't erase what happened, but it's where we start. This department, under my leadership, will be transparent. We will be accountable, and we will work every single day to be worthy of your trust." He dismissed the crowd, and as people began to disperse, talking quietly amongst themselves, he walked over to me. For the first time, I saw something other than iron control in his eyes. It was a sliver of respect. "That was the hardest thing you'll ever do as a police officer," he said quietly. "Harder than any foot chase, any fight, any arrest." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Now," he said, "you go back to work, and you keep the promise you just made." He turned to leave, but stopped. He looked over at his son. Jamal was walking toward me. He stopped a few feet away, uncertainty on his face. He looked at the cut on his lip, which was already starting to heal. "My dad says people can mess up," Jamal said, not quite meeting my eyes. "That what matters is what you do after." He finally looked up and met my gaze. "I accept your apology, officer." He didn't smile. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He just gave a slight nod and walked back to his father. But it was enough. It was more than enough. As I watched Chief Irons put his arm around his son and walk away, I knew my career wasn't over. It was just starting. Tuesday had been the worst day of my life. But Wednesday was the first day of the rest of it.